The Aurora Stellar Alliance, a shimmering constellation of disparate stars spanning a measurable slice of the Andromeda Galaxy, had been a beacon of fragile hope for 3,000 cycles. It wasn't a unified empire, ruled by a single, iron fist. Rather, it was a delicate tapestry woven from the threads of 17 distinct civilizations, each as vibrant and unique as the nebulae that birthed them. A fragile balance, constantly teetering on the edge of collapse, sustained only by the shared desire to prevent the extinguishing of all light in the face of galactic darkness. The Silvan, beings of shimmering, photosynthetic skin and ethereal grace, were the Alliance's artists and diplomats. Hailing from the verdant, binary sun world of Eldoria, they possessed an uncanny ability to perceive and manipulate the emotional currents of any sentient species. Their art installations, shimmering projections of light and sound that spanned entire sectors, were legendary. Their diplomats, silver-tongued and empathic, had averted countless conflicts through sheer force of persuasion. The Kryll, on the other hand, were creatures of pure logic and engineering prowess. From the silicon-rich world of Xylos, they were the Alliance's architects, scientists, and builders. Their cities, intricate webs of crystal and energy, were testaments to their mastery of mathematics and materials science. Every jump gate, every shield generator, every terraforming engine within the Alliance's sphere of influence bore the hallmark of Kryll ingenuity. Then there were the Zydonians, a warrior race with bodies hardened by the gravity of their home world, Grax Prime. Their culture revolved around honor, discipline, and unwavering loyalty. With their exoskeletons, the Zydonians had formed the first line of defense against the Void Horde. Each species, each culture, each world within the Aurora Stellar Alliance held its own unique piece of the puzzle, contributing to the precarious equilibrium that kept the galaxy from plunging into total chaos. The glue holding it all together was the Alliance Council, a body of representatives from each member world, charged with making decisions that affected the entire galaxy. It was a forum where vastly different perspectives clashed, where centuries-old traditions were challenged, and where compromises, often bitter ones, were forged. Humanity's entry into the Alliance was, to put it mildly, controversial. For millennia, Earth had been a self-contained crucible of conflict, a death world by galactic standards. A planet where the very atmosphere seemed to conspire against its inhabitants, where diseases ran rampant, predators lurked at every turn, and where humans had turned their aggression on themselves, engaging in an endless cycle of war and destruction. For a death world, the Earth Federation was thriving and advancing in an alarming rate. Many members questioned whether to vote for humanity to join the Alliance, as their nature would eventually lead to the corruption and destabilization of the balance the Alliance had kept for so long. And that was before the Hope's End black hole incident. It began subtly, with anomalies in subspace communications emanating from Sector 9, a frontier region bordering the outer rim of the Andromeda Galaxy. Then came the reports of star systems falling silent, their energy signatures vanishing from the galactic maps. Finally, the frantic distress signals, fragmented and distorted, painting a picture of unimaginable horror. The Void Horde. That name, whispered in hushed tones across the Alliance Council chambers, brought a chill to the bone of every sentient being present. A relentless tide of darkness, born from beyond the known universe, consuming all life and light in its path, leaving behind only a sterile void. The Alliance mustered its defenses, sending fleets to intercept the advancing darkness. But against the Void Horde's insatiable hunger and terrifying adaptability, conventional warfare proved futile. World after world fell, their populations wiped out, their cultures extinguished, their energy signatures swallowed by the encroaching void. The loss shook the very foundations of the Alliance, exposing the fragility of their hard-won peace and the limitations of their defensive strategies. The Alliance was no match for what was coming. The destruction of the Hope's End was not only a great hit to morality, but also a symbol that all factions need to be united to protect what's to come. It was amid this growing despair that a solution, one that seemed both desperate and promising, emerged from a most unexpected source: Earth. It was now humanity's time to step into the grand scheme. Echoes in the void. The Alliance Council chambers, usually a cacophony of alien languages and fervent debates, was hushed in an atmosphere of apprehensive anticipation. Holographic projections of collapsing star systems danced in the air, casting an eerie light on the faces of the assembled representatives. Ambassador Lithe, a towering Silvan with skin that shimmered with a gentle, bioluminescent glow, rose from his seat. He was a figure of immense respect within the Alliance, known for his wisdom, his compassion, and his unwavering commitment to peace. However, even his serene demeanor was tinged with a hint of desperation. "The message," he began, his voice echoing through the chamber, "has been translated." A collective gasp rippled through the assembly. All communication channels, even the most obscure and encrypted, carried the message. Each world, nation, and sector heard the echoes from what would come in time be called as the Twisted Nebula, even through language barriers and time differences. The leader's eyes flickered to senior linguist Dr. Eliza Morgan, a woman whose name had become associated with her achievements. Morgan was well known for her expertise within many different fields. Lyra had lost both of her parents during an alien raid 30 years ago. She has not smiled since. But her sharp mind was respected within Coalition intelligence. Lyra rose, adjusting her glasses as if to focus her vision, and began. "The message is not just the garbled scream of a dying world, there is another layer beneath." "And that layer suggests?" Elder Glint asked. "The translation matrices embedded within the message itself. It indicates a civilization capable of not just understanding, but anticipating and manipulating the linguistic and cultural nuances of countless species." The silence that followed was broken by the gruff voice of Zargan, the KRYL delegate. "So, we are supposed to believe this, convenient translation? That this is not a trap, a deception to lure us into the path of this Void Horde? We analyzed it, General Zargan." Lyra spoke again, a bit shaky. "I believe what this entity says. The likelihood of such a thing is astronomically low," Zargan countered, his voice resonating with suspicion. "No civilization should be capable of such linguistic mastery. Unless," a calm voice interjected, "they designed the message to be understood by any sufficiently advanced species." A figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. Captain Marcus Vance, the newly appointed ambassador from the Earth Federation, stepped forward, his gaze steady and unflinching. Even among the diverse forms of life present, he cut an imposing figure. Tall, muscular, and bearing the weight of countless battles etched onto his face, Vance radiated an aura of quiet intensity. He was a product of a world forged in fire, a warrior honed by centuries of conflict. "I don't pretend to understand the intricacies of interstellar communication, counselors," Vance continued, his voice a low, resonant rumble. "But I do understand desperation. That message is a plea for help, plain and simple." The murmurs of discontent rose again, a cacophony of alien skepticism. "And why should we, the Aurora Stellar Alliance, answer the call of a death world?" A reptilian delegate hissed, his forked tongue flicking nervously. "Your people are renowned for their brutality, their insatiable thirst for war. You are as much a threat to galactic peace as this Void Horde you speak of." Vance met the reptile's gaze, unflinching. "We are not proud of our past, counselor. We have made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But we have learned from them." His words were met with a chorus of disbelief and derision. "Learned?" Another delegate scoffed. "Your people continue to expand, to conquer, to wage war even within your own star system." "That is not true." A voice rose, the stern face of Admiral Clark on the projected screen that stood near the entrance. "The Federation is the foundation of what Earth should be, and should have been long ago if it hadn't been for people like you and your kind," Clark said in anger before stepping back to compose himself. "My apologies, counselors. But this insinuation is unfounded. The Federation aims to be a peacekeeping force throughout space to stop conflict like that of the Void." He paused, his gaze hardening. "Whether you believe it or not, the threat posed by the Void Horde is real, and it is imminent. If we do nothing, it will consume us all, regardless of our differences, regardless of our past sins." "But what are our options?" Elder Glint asked as he turned to Lyra, This power's core is unknown. We don't even understand the power structure, or if they even have one. This is suicide. Vance looked from glint to lithe, his expression a mix of determination and weariness. I'm not asking you to trust us, he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. I'm asking you to trust the evidence. To trust the fear in that message. To trust your own instincts. We do not know the extent of the Void Horde and its presence, therefore it is a risk we must take. The Ghost in the Machine. Cycle 2384.7. The data stream was a whisper, a ghost in the machine, barely registering on the sensorium of Relay Station Omicron 9. Technician Jax, bleary-eyed from shift cycle rotations, almost dismissed it as background radiation, the cosmic hum of distant quasars. It was another monotonous day on the lonely outpost. Omicron 9 orbited Xylos Minor, a lifeless moon circling a gas giant on the fringes of KRYL space. Its primary function was simple: relay. It amplified and retransmitted communications between the core worlds of the Aurora Stellar Alliance and the exploratory outposts pushing into the uncharted territories beyond the rim. Excitement was a commodity rarer than neutronium on Omicron 9. Jax had expected another day of numb fingers and dry protein rations. Until it happened. The anomaly appeared at precisely 7:12 Galactic Standard Time. It washed over every communication channel simultaneously, the secure quantum lines used by Alliance warships, the heavily encrypted diplomatic frequencies, even the archaic subspace radio waves still favored by the Silvan artists for their organic warmth. The signal latched onto every single station. Jax, heart pounding in his synth-augmented chest, scrambled to isolate the source. The readings were impossible. The signals seemed to be originating from everywhere and nowhere at once, a paradox defying the very laws of physics. It was a distress call. At least it was the closest his mind could think of it. The message wasn't a broadcast, not in the traditional sense. It was more of a resonance, an imprint overlaid onto the fabric of communication itself. Whatever civilization had sent it had mastered a form of interstellar messaging far beyond anything the Alliance had ever encountered. The automated translation protocols kicked in, initially spitting out a torrent of gibberish. But then, as if by some cosmic miracle, structure emerged from the chaos. Fragments of meaning began to coalesce, like shimmering particles forming a cohesive whole. Help us. They are coming. We can't stop them. The words, simple yet chilling, manifested in every language known to the Alliance. In Silvan, they appeared as shimmering, bioluminescent glyphs that pulsed with sorrow. For the KRYL, they formed perfect geometric symbols of utter despair. For humans on Earth, it appeared on any and all media device. A digital apparition that spoke in each human language with the same dread. Jax stared at the translation scrolling across his console, a cold dread creeping into his bones. His first thought was that it was a hoax, a prank of unimaginable scale. But the sheer force of the signal, the raw, unadulterated terror that seemed to seep from the words themselves, convinced him otherwise. This was no joke. This was a genuine plea for help. He activated the station's emergency broadcast system, overriding all other transmissions. This is Omicron 9 to all Alliance forces. We are receiving a high-priority distress signal. Source unknown. Translation attached. Authenticity uncertain, but the threat level appears catastrophic. Repeat, this is Omicron 9. The message was now loose in the stellar ocean, a desperate cry in the face of an encroaching storm. He could only hope it would reach someone, somewhere, who could make a difference. Whispers of doubt. The ripple effects of Jax's broadcast spread like wildfire through the Alliance. On Elysium, the Silvan homeworld, the message manifested in the Great Harmony Grove, a vast, living temple of interconnected trees that served as the planet's emotional center. The trees pulsed with grief, their leaves turning a somber shade of violet. On Xylos, the KRYL High Councils analyzed the signal with cold, calculating precision. They scrutinized its structure, its anomalies, its inconsistencies. They debated the probabilities, weighed the risks, and calculated the potential consequences of action or inaction. But, as any of the leaders would agree, action must be taken. The Alliance Council chambers on Ethel, the neutral world that served as the capital, descended into chaos. The holographic projections of crumbling worlds intensified the sense of urgency, creating a sense of palpable dread among the assembled representatives. "This is preposterous!" Councillor Forlag, a towering Krog with plated armor and a rasping voice, slammed his fist on the table. "We cannot simply accept this emotional outburst as fact. We need proof, verification." "What kind of proof do you require, Forlag?" Ambassador Lythe countered, his voice laced with weary patience. "The complete annihilation of another star system? The screams of billions echoing across the void?" "Precisely," Forlag snarled. "Until we have concrete evidence, I refuse to commit Alliance resources to what could be a wild goose chase, or worse, a cleverly disguised trap." "And what if it is real, Forlag?" Ambassador Anya, a representative of the Zydonian species, inquired from her end seat. "The very nature of the message being universal in languages and frequency, while genius, makes very little sense." Across the chamber, senior linguist Dr. Eliza Morgan, a young human, who had been invited as a specialist by the Admiral, looked up from the stream of data that coursed over her own display. She was a woman of sharp intellect and unwavering focus, her piercing gaze betraying a mind constantly working, constantly analyzing. "Forgive my interruption, counselors," she said, her voice carrying with a quiet authority. "But I believe I can shed some light on this matter." All eyes turned to her, a mix of curiosity and apprehension in their alien gazes. Humans, as relative newcomers to the galactic stage, were still viewed with a degree of suspicion by many within the Alliance. Their history of conflict, their aggressive expansion, and their seemingly endless capacity for self-destruction made them an unpredictable, even unsettling, presence. "The structure of the message, specifically the embedded translation matrices, is unlike anything I have ever encountered," Morgan explained, her fingers dancing across her holographic keyboard. "It is as if the message was designed to be understood, instantly and perfectly, by any sentient species capable of receiving it." "And what does that imply, Doctor?" Lythe asked, his voice measured. "It implies a level of technological sophistication that is almost incomprehensible," Morgan replied, her brow furrowing in thought. "It suggests a civilization with a mastery of communication and cognition far beyond our own." A murmur of unease spread through the chamber. The idea that a civilization capable of such feats would be pleading for help was deeply unsettling. "It could be a trick," Tarek, a military general, roared to be heard with a deep voice. "Those screams for help. What if they are screams for our own kind?" Asterisk. "Do you have anything to say in that regard, Dr. Morgan?" Lythe asked softly. Morgan took a breath, and replied, "That's what I'm afraid of. A Deathworld's compass. A full coalition would lead to a full-scale galactic war that would destroy more than what's been taken," Lythe replied. The Council had reached out, after the reports that came from the newly appointed. "The Doombringer, Marcus. That's just as bad as doing nothing." A familiar voice bellowed from the shadows. Admiral Clark came out in a hologram broadcast. "Do you understand this galaxy will burn to the ground if a single world falls? Then our alliance will slowly, but surely be eliminated. We are fortunate to have been given the chance, yet people like you doubt it." Glint interjected, "Admiral, such language is uncalled for." "But it was all for naught. With all due respect, Elder Glint, sometimes a little anger is needed to get a point across, but such actions of Earth do not make our own comfortable." A new presence spoke, whose face had no been seen till this moment, spoke from the room, as if it had been there all along. Asterisk. "What has the esteemed guest to say?" Glint asked. The voice was that of Yala, the scribe, the leader and representative of the KRYL. Her entire body was made up of a synthetic fiber like crystal, with circuit lines running across. "With all due respect, Alliance's goal of a world without arms is failing, with just the void swarm," Yala said. The Earth Federation can prove to be of use to the Council and to our future. So you all are deciding to agree with this insane proposal? Lith asked in shock. Then you cannot see where fate is leading us to, Glint replied as he shook his head. But if not me, who shall do it? Clark replied as he stared at Lith. And in any case, we are already going, Clark said as the broadcast shooed down. Darkness arriving. Marcus reviewed all the profiles of the Coalition Council that they would soon join in battle. Some were helpful, while the others were against them. That's the best we have, Vance said under his breath, as Morgan got closer to him. Is everything in check? Vance said. I can safely run the ship myself, Morgan replied. I am not worried about that. But are you fine with this, Vance replied, worried. I have to, Commander. Morgan looked up to the sky. If this succeeds, we wouldn't have to sacrifice the future of our kids. I understand that more than anyone, Vance replied. Before leaving the room, Morgan took his hand and stared straight to his eyes. Just promise to return safely, please, Commander. The ship then engaged its engine and jumped for war. I hope this gets you started on your novel. Let me know if you have any other requests or suggestions. The vast amphitheater of the Citadel of Erelon, home to the Aurora Stellar Alliance's Security Council, hummed with barely suppressed tension. Sunlight filtered through the iridescent, bioluminescent flora clinging to the towering structures, casting an ethereal glow upon the faces gathered below. Representatives from the 17-member species were present, a kaleidoscope of forms and features reflecting the diverse tapestry of the Alliance. But beneath the veneer of unity, cracks were beginning to show. The holographic displays projected at the chamber's center showed the chilling reality. Stark images of lifeless worlds, star systems swallowed by an advancing void, and the fragmented remnants of once proud fleets reduced to cosmic dust. The dirge from the twisted nebula, now officially designated Sector Gamma 9, echoed in the silence, a haunting soundtrack to the galaxy's impending doom. The situation is, to put it mildly, dire. Ambassador Lythe of the Silvan, his voice carrying across the chamber with an uncharacteristic tremor, opened the proceedings. Our scout ships, those that have returned, report that the Void Swarm is unlike anything we have ever encountered. Conventional weapons are proving ineffective, and their ability to adapt and evolve is unprecedented. A collective murmur of unease rippled through the assembly. For centuries, the Alliance had relied on its advanced technology, its sophisticated defense systems, and its commitment to diplomacy to maintain peace and security. But the Void Swarm seemed to defy all known rules, rendering their carefully constructed defenses obsolete. What of the quasar cannons on Aegis Prime? Counselor Zargon of the Kerwilo, his multifaceted eyes gleaming with a cold, analytical light, demanded. Were they not designed to obliterate any threat within a parsec's radius? They were, Lythe replied, a hint of weariness in his voice. But the swarm, it simply absorbed the energy, adapting its shields to become impervious to that frequency. By the time our forces realized the futility, Aegis Prime itself was consumed. A collective gasp swept through the chamber. Aegis Prime, the linchpin of the Alliance's outer defenses, fallen so quickly, so completely. The news spread like a chill, freezing the blood of even the most seasoned veterans present. A new voice cut through the mounting despair. Admiral Clark. The image of Earth Federation's Admiral Clark appeared, the Earthling a stark, stoic figure amid the alien splendor of the chamber. He looked at all of the species. With all due respect, people. The way you all are acting is what made you weak. Now that the Void Horde is at our doorstep and you still wish to talk? The time for that is long gone. There was an uproar from several members of the council, but Clark, never one to be easily intimidated, held his ground, waiting for the commotion to subside. When it did, he continued, his voice resonating with unwavering conviction. The Federation has faced threats as grave as this one before. We have learned, through bitter experience, that sometimes, the only way to fight darkness is with darkness. The implication hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Clark was advocating for a military solution, a strategy of aggressive counteroffensive that clashed sharply with the Alliance's long-held pacifist ideals. Are you suggesting we abandon our principles, Admiral? Ambassador Lythe asked, his voice tinged with disappointment. That we resort to the very tactics that have led to so much suffering and destruction in your own past? I am suggesting we do what is necessary to survive, Ambassador, Clark replied, his gaze unwavering. Our history is our burden, not our shackle. We are not the monsters you fear. We are survivors. And we know how to fight when pushed to the brink. And just how would the Federation plan to fight this swarm? Zargon interjected, skepticism dripping from his voice. You have no fleets, no technology that can rival our own. What could you possibly offer us? If you all allow it. General Harris projected himself in view of all races within the room. We have a biological weapon. It is still in development, but if you are all willing to let us join you, we are confident it can stop the threat you all have at your front steps. The reaction was immediate and fierce. The very suggestion of biological warfare, even against such a terrifying enemy, was anathema to many within the Alliance. Accusations of barbarism and recklessness were hurled at Clark and the human, echoes of the ancient prejudices that had fueled centuries of conflict on Earth. The Silvan, with their deep reverence for all life, recoiled in horror. The Kryll, ever cautious, questioned the long-term consequences of unleashing such a weapon upon the galaxy. Even some of the Zydonians, hardened warriors as they were, expressed unease at the prospect of resorting to such a drastic measure. This is madness, Counselor Alara, a Kryll physician with delicate crystal protrusions adorning her head, protested. We cannot unleash a self-replicating pathogen upon the galaxy. We have no idea what the long-term consequences might be. We'll be no better than the Void Hordes. But this isn't any self-replicating virus that any of you would think, Morgan said calmly. This weapon is designed to affect the genetics of those in the Void and is 100% safe for all living organisms. We can work together and save everyone. Clark maintained his composure, his gaze sweeping over the assembled representatives. I understand your concerns, he said, his voice firm. But we are facing an enemy that threatens to erase all life from existence. We cannot afford the luxury of moral purity. Sometimes, the only way to win is to fight fire with fire. He paused, letting his words sink in. We are not asking you to embrace our past, counselors. We are asking you to trust our present. We have evolved. We have learned. We are ready to fight alongside you, to use every tool at our disposal to protect the galaxy. But we cannot do it if you tie our hands behind our backs. The debate raged on for hours, the chamber filled with impassioned arguments and desperate pleas. The holographic projections flickered ominously, a constant reminder of the impending doom that loomed over them all. Lythe had been silent for a long while in the meeting. The information he had at the tip of his fingers could sway things. He could decide the fate of countless trillions if a decision was made. After a long while he spoke. I propose this. Instead of risking further losses, and the information provided by humans, Earth Federation should be our shield. There were murmurs of disagreement across the room. He continued, This alliance can only exist as long as we can compromise. Now do we make a decision, or are we going to go our separate ways? It had been a test. The alliance had to decide on their future. To what extent are each members willing to trust each other? For the first time in recorded galactic history, trust had been established at a galactic scale. Whether it lasts or not, that was for fate to decide. I trust this is helpful and gets you on your way to creating a full novel. Let me know if you have any other requests. The docking clamps released with a metallic hiss that reverberated through the burning torch's armored hull. Captain Marcus Vance, standing rigidly on the bridge, felt the familiar tremor that heralded the beginning of yet another voyage to the unknown. He watched the shimmering cerulean sphere of Earth recede on the main viewscreen, a bittersweet pang tugging at his gut. He rarely let sentimentality cloud his judgment, not after the years he'd spent staring into the face of war. Earth, the cradle of humanity, was now just another strategic asset, a vital supply depot in a game with stakes beyond comprehension. Despite being a part of the Alliance Council, Vance saw the true nature of war. He knew what it meant to lead men and women to certain death in a battle of hope, but his responsibility was to send them into the battlefield to give that glimmer of hope to their loved ones. All systems nominal, Captain. Lieutenant Anya Petrova, her voice crisp and professional, announced from her station. Quantum shift drive primed. Navigation lock established on Harmony's Reach. Vance nodded, his gaze unwavering. Engage. With a silent surge of energy, the world around them dissolved into a swirling vortex of quantum light. They had severed the tangible link to Earth, hurtling towards a rendezvous with destiny. Marcus Vance was a man forged in the fires of a dying world. The Federation had made what use of such resources it had and forged some of Earth's best and brightest. After a childhood scrounging for survival in the ruined megacities of old Europa, he joined the Global Defense Force at 15, driven by a burning desire to protect what remained of humanity. He was built for war, a living weapon with the discipline and ruthlessness to execute the most difficult orders. He also held a deep-seated distrust for all that was alien. His wariness stemmed from what little the history books contained, and all the battles he had been sent to. From a young age, Marcus understood that you can't trust what you can't see, a lesson that stuck with him to this very day. But his experiences had also taught him the value of sacrifice, the importance of loyalty, and the unwavering courage that could bloom even in the most desperate of circumstances. These hard-won virtues were what had earned him the respect of his crew, the trust of his superiors, and ultimately, the command of the Burning Torch. Turning from the viewport, Vance addressed his crew, his voice a low, steady rumble that cut through the hum of the ship's engines. We are entering uncharted territory, people. We know next to nothing about what awaits us at Harmony's Reach, but one thing is certain, we are humanity's first contact. Our actions here will determine the course of history for our species, and perhaps for the entire galaxy. Follow orders, trust your training, and remember why we are here. The message had reached to many of these crew members. The goal to protect their people, who can't fight with them. This was their way of showing their respect. A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the bridge, a silent affirmation of their commitment to the mission. Vance's leadership was subtle but firm. He would make sure that each member under his command were at a 100% at all times. For what was waiting for them was a threat unlike any other. His gaze lingered on one figure in particular, Dr. Eliza Morgan. She stood hunched over a console, her fingers flying across the holographic display as she analyzed reams of data with feverish intensity. Her lab coat, usually pristine white, was now stained with a kaleidoscope of exotic compounds, a testament to her tireless dedication. Morgan was a force of nature, a brilliant but driven scientist with an almost obsessive focus on her work. Her intellect was razor-sharp, her insights often bordering on the prophetic. It was Morgan's expertise in biological warfare that had convinced the Federation to offer assistance to the Aurora Stellar Alliance. And so a dangerous decision was made, leading to a chain of even more dangerous decisions. During meetings, the council members seemed to have a mutual agreement, an act that was out of her expertise, that put her on edge. The quantum shift ended with a jarring lurch, flinging the burning torch back into the familiar embrace of real space. Captain Vance braced himself against the console, his internal chronometer realigning to the new stellar coordinates. We have arrived at Harmony's Reach, Captain, Lieutenant Petrova announced, her voice steady despite the sudden jolt. All systems green. Awaiting clearance to approach. The main view screen flickered to life, resolving into an image that stole the breath from Vance's lungs. It wasn't the sterile, metallic construct he'd expected. Harmony's Reach was a living thing. It resembled a vast, interconnected network of organic structures, resembling enormous trees whose limbs branched out in intricate patterns. Interwoven with these structures were shimmering energy conduits and crystal pathways, creating a harmonious fusion of nature and technology unlike anything he'd ever seen. Vance found himself staring at an orbital botanical garden on steroids. Sections of the station, encased in shimmering translucent membranes, revealed lush, terraced gardens suspended in zero gravity. Waterfalls cascaded down crystal surfaces, feeding vibrant ecosystems teeming with life. It was an explosion of organic beauty against the cold, unforgiving backdrop of space. Incredible, Dr. Morgan murmured, her eyes wide with a fascination that bordered on reverence. It's a living ecosystem, a self-sustaining symphony of life. The sheer scale of Harmony's reach, its intricate organic design, and the obvious dedication to the preservation of life, filled Vance with a conflicting mix of awe and unease. It was everything Earth was not, a stark reminder of the ecological devastation his own species had wrought upon its home world. "This is Harmony's Reach Control," a melodious voice echoed over the comms channel. "Welcome, Burning Torch. You are cleared for docking at Gateway 7. Please proceed with caution. The environment is sensitive." Vance acknowledged the transmission, issuing the orders for approach. As the Burning Torch moved closer, the details of the station became even more breathtaking. Bioluminescent flora glowed with an inner light, illuminating intricate patterns etched into the organic structures. Small, avian-like creatures with iridescent wings flitted through the gardens, scattering shimmering trails of light. The atmosphere felt almost sacred. Docking at Gateway 7, the Burning Torch sealed its access tubes to the Harmony's Reach, and the team assembled into the landing zone. With them were Dr. Morgan, Lieutenant Adams, and 8 of their best security specialists. The trip was uneventful and the team reached a large chamber. As they entered, there were the faces of what appeared to be dignitaries in the coalition, many of whom were from the call earlier. Ambassador Lythe and Elder Glint awaited them, their expressions solemn and strained. Lythe, true to what Vance perceived on the viewscreen, was a Silvan, and stood above 7 feet tall. A true testament to their species' dedication to the preservation of all life. He was almost a reminder to humanity to have the moral high ground, even when it was time to make very difficult decisions. "Captain Vance, Dr. Morgan," Lythe greeted, his voice a soothing balm that seemed to calm the very air around them. "We welcome you to Harmony's Reach. We are deeply grateful for your swift response to our plea." Glint's multifaceted eyes, however, held a different light. "We appreciate your willingness to assist us, humans," he said, his voice sharper and more guarded. "But forgive me if I harbor some reservations. Your reputation precedes you." Vance met Glint's gaze, unflinching. "We are aware of your concerns, Elder Glint," he replied, his voice carefully measured. "We are here to offer our help, not to repeat the mistakes of our past." The air crackled with tension, thick enough to cut with a disruptor blade. The two leaders studied each other, a silent battle of wills waged across the vast cultural divide that separated them. "The void is closer," Lythe said, breaking the silence. "We must show you all that it is capable of." Lythe gestured towards a large holographic display, where a series of images began to unfold. Worlds being devoured, planets collapsing into themselves, civilizations erased from existence. The sheer scale of the destruction was staggering, a testament to the terrifying power of the Void Horde. Vance felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He had seen war, had witnessed the devastation it could wreak. But nothing could have prepared him for this. This was not merely a conflict, but an annihilation, a cosmic cancer that threatened to consume the entire galaxy. "This footage was taken from exploration vessel of our Federation." Glint's voice resonated with a deep power. "But they have all since been wiped from existence. You sent what must have been at least 100 vessel without hope for recovery." Vance mumbled in disbelief. "The only way, for us to even be sure. But at what cost, I must ask myself," Lythe replied. "The numbers that you see here only accounts to 1% of what we have lost," Glint said. "What you're going to do will never make up for all of what they have lost, what we have lost." "Is there another alternative?" Vance replied. "If there are, please do tell." It was clear they had the support of humanity, but the rest of the council needed some more reason before they would make an action. "It can't be said," Lythe spoke quickly. "We have been through this for countless centuries. And we were only a fraction as lucky as you are." "It's more than that," Lyra replied in a panic and turned on her portable terminal. In a matter of milliseconds, Lyra had placed herself between both sides, as she had a sense of what would happen. "That the source is not a faction or force, The Void is a universe. It's a virus that spreads from world to world. And after all our calculations, it can't even be reasoned with. Then chaos struck. The power went out and there were only red lights as the ship was heading towards an unknown location and emergency sirens. As the alarms and lights went on, the hologram changed to static. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the chamber, a sound that seemed to claw at the very fabric of space and time. The time of harmony is at an end. This was only the beginning. The station descended into chaos. Red lights flashed, alarms blared, and the soft, ethereal music that usually permeated Harmony's reach was replaced by a cacophony of panic. Panic had been the first thing to spread, the second was the Void Horde. A few hours had passed and everyone was barricaded. This didn't concern the humans that had arrived. "Status report," Vance bellowed, his voice cutting through the din. "Shields at 70% and falling, Captain. Multiple hull breaches reported in sectors 4 and 7. We're detecting massive energy signatures closing on our position." Petrova called back, her hands flying across her console. The void was already within, tearing its way through the station, corrupting everything it touched. The initial silence of the hive seemed to turn into the echoes of the souls swallowed up as they traveled throughout every channel possible. They had the opportunity to save the galaxy and the planet, however, to put everyone here at peace. But what was peace in this galaxy? The question came as sudden and natural. "The Coalition are already working on defenses that are known to them, the rest is up to you." The human general and his soldiers charged out of the transport dock, where they now found themselves in chaos. They ran through the halls, pushing back the darkness that encroached deeper and deeper. "Where are we headed, Commander?" "I want to set up a perimeter as fast as possible, but first we are going to see what we can deal with this swarm." As the unit progressed further, Vance and the men faced their first sign of the swarm. They were unlike anything they had seen. Some were insects, some were beasts, and some were just the remnants of those who died. But they kept on pushing forward, as the unit fought their way to the science division where Morgan was still stationed. "All right, listen up," Vance barked, his voice echoing through the makeshift command post. "We're setting up a perimeter around the science division. That's our priority." The air was thick with the smell of ozone and singed metal, red lights from every section of the halls. But their job was not to save this place, but to get the cure. "Doc, what you need to do, we have your back covered." The commander gave one final stare before locking up and ordering the men to move out. The following fire was gruesome and something these soldiers were used to. But even in the midst of this horror, the doctor never looked away to see those dying for him, or all of them. "It's ready, Commander, I finally have the results," Morgan shouted. "Make sure this can even work, Doc, and prep it. I want to make sure before all this is for naught," Commander Vance shouted on comms. As the test started, the ship then shakes. "There is too many. I'm detecting 5 waves coming," Adams said through the comms. Dr. Eliza Morgan stood alone in her makeshift lab aboard the research vessel Pastor, her face etched with exhaustion and a deep-seated moral conflict that threatened to consume her. Holographic displays shimmered around her, projecting intricate molecular structures of the Void Swarm, the enemy that threatened to extinguish all life in the galaxy. But it was the weapon, the one potential solution, that occupied her entire being. The lab, a cramped and utilitarian space amidst the organic splendor of Harmony's reach, had become her sanctuary, her prison, and her battlefield. For weeks, she had toiled relentlessly, driven by a fierce determination to find a weakness in the swarm's seemingly impenetrable armor. But now, on the cusp of a breakthrough, she found herself facing a dilemma that challenged the very core of her being. Her research had yielded a viable option. A tailored pathogen, designed to exploit a specific weakness in the swarm's unique biology, capable of disrupting its cellular functions and preventing it from reproducing. A biological weapon. The very words tasted like ash in her mouth. As a scientist, she had dedicated her life to the preservation and advancement of life, not its destruction. The images from the past still lingered in her heart. Back on Earth, the world that she loved, Morgan still had images burned in her memories. Images of her parents, coughing for air, while trying to bring medical aid to the ruined villages of the Outlands. As most people of Earth were fighting over territory, those who were not took on their own roles. That being, to make sure the world survived by any means necessary. But at what cost? In this new universe, she was stuck again in the same moral quagmire. The cycle of violence, it seemed, was an intrinsic part of sentient existence, a dark truth that echoed across the vast emptiness of space. She ran a gloved hand through her disheveled hair, her mind reeling. Was she truly any different from the genocidal entities she sought to destroy? Was she sacrificing her own humanity in the name of saving others? The faces of everyone that had been consumed by this threat appeared in her mind to stop what was happening to them again. If the cost to pay was to make this universe safe, what choice was there? The images on the displays flickered, shifting from molecular structures to holographic renderings of entire worlds consumed by the swarm. The statistics were horrifying: billions dead, civilizations erased, and entire ecosystems reduced to sterile, lifeless husks. What right did she have to impose her moral scruples on the countless trillions of lives that were at stake? To condemn them to oblivion because she couldn't stomach the idea of using a weapon she deemed immoral? The calm channel crackled to life, pulling her from her tormented reverie. "Dr. Morgan, this is Captain Vance. Do you have an update?" His voice, usually so steady and assured, held a note of urgency that cut through her to the bone. She knew what he was asking, what the entire Alliance was waiting to hear. But she hesitated, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a physical burden. "Yes, Captain," she finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I have a viable pathogen. It targets the swarm's unique biological network, disrupting their cellular functions and preventing them from reproducing." "Effective?" Vance asked, his voice terse. "Extremely," Morgan confirmed. "In lab conditions, it was nearly 100% effective. We think that it is the same for all the Bei Dan Wukong life forms, and believe this can be our only way to buy the Alliance enough time for everything." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines and the distant alarms. Vance, a man of action, understood the complexities of the situation. He also understood the terrible cost of inaction. "What are the risks, Doctor?" he finally asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Morgan took a deep breath, steeling herself for the inevitable. "The primary risk is adaptation," she said. "If the swarm can adapt to the pathogen, it could render it useless, and potentially even strengthen them. However, as long as they haven't adapted, this can be our saving grace to buy our people time to flee." The chances were a gamble that they couldn't be so sure. The thought of failure was crippling her. Vance fell silent once more, contemplating the information. It was a high-stakes gamble, but it was one they had to take. The clock was ticking. "All right, Morgan, do what needs to be done," Vance said. "I'll need time to synthesize a viable sample, and a secure way to get it inside the biosystem of Helios," she said, running diagnostics to come to the conclusion. "At least a couple of hours." "We'll get you that time, Morgan," Vance replied firmly. "Do what you can." As the connection severed, Vance sat in his chair. All was resting on a single person. Their last resort. But as the data kept coming in, he understood this was wrong, and had been from the start. In the Coalition headquarters of the Silent Dawn, as the fleet began to organize themselves, Dr. Morgan looked through the schematics they had provided to them. "There is a fatal flaw in all this, sir, and I think I can help." The two were in deep thought, and the tension was at an all-time high. But something was wrong, or Morgan felt there was. The pieces just didn't fit. The core swarm units didn't have a weakness. "Can we even do this?" asked Morgan. "I don't like it, you don't like it. But we have no choice." And as the two were stuck in place, a new image had been displayed to the screen in front. It was in their message. Morgan pointed. The screen changed to various lines of codes and characters that had been embedded into the message, which were hard for even her to decode. But there was one key point in them she was interested. "It's not about the units themselves. It's the planet. What was the plan B and its cost? It was all too late, with explosions on the ships that would be accompanying it to the new world to escape this hell. Everyone was in alert. We have enemies incoming. The ships are being attacked. We need help. There were people dying, and for nothing, he had to keep pushing on even when everything around him was falling apart. Just have the new adjustments downloaded, set and ship out. We need to get this over with. I understand, sir. Get ready, it will be a bumpy ride. Back to the command room, a new hologram appeared. It was a member of the Federation. Earth Command is sending the coordinates of a special location, he said. It might be a risky plan, but we have no choice. They all knew what it meant, and what the cost was. As the coordinates were downloaded to the ship, Morgan entered and approached Vance. In her hands were a device. All right, Doc, let me know if it's all set. Thank you, Commander. Morgan gave a bow as he walked away. As Morgan went to the pod, it quickly turned to the commander. There are problems, Commander. Something is interfering with the calculations. Morgan's eyes became wide with fear as she saw the potentiality of not succeeding. What is that supposed to mean? There is no knowing how things will turn out. But the most important thing you need to know to make sure you return safely and we follow the plan. Can I trust you too? Morgan was silent, as she was looking back and forth on the plan. It was a dangerous one, but she trusted it. Just come back safely, Morgan said as she shut the door. 5 minutes to ignition, a voice said on the comms. All right, time to make sure we fulfill this to the end, Vance replied as his small band of team was preparing for their operation. The ship was ready to depart. But little did Vance know. This would be a death sentence to most if they failed. The firebreak shuddered violently as it sliced through the churning atmosphere of Hyperion. Lightning, vast and terrifying, arced across the viewport, briefly illuminating the storm-racked landscape below. The ship was a coffin in the sky. Inside the cockpit, Captain Marcus Vance, his face illuminated by the flickering displays, wrestled with the controls. Lieutenant Adams sat beside him, her hands flying across the navigational panel, her brow furrowed in concentration. Turbulence is increasing, Captain, she announced, her voice tight with strain. We're approaching the vortex layer. We've reached point of no return, Captain. Vance glanced at the timer on his console. 40 minutes until the catalyst had to be deployed. 40 minutes until the small chance that humanity may be able to survive this long. There was little to be said. Those remaining all looked at each other, a farewell to a memory that had once was. It was now time to show if these Deathworlders, or human to some, were going to save the universe, or destroy it. Let's get this done, Vance finally said. There's something you should know, sir, before we get too far up ahead to proceed this. Morgan's voice echoed on the comms in this suicide trip. The commander nodded and with that, continued to move forward. The storm got worse and worse as the engine became at risk of dying at any second, but the two knew that the fate of Helios was in their hands, and everyone else in the galaxy. Reed and Morgan remembered the people of Earth. The good and bad, how people would band together when they saw a common cause. The thought gave them hope as they understood they were about to change their world. If they came back or not. After the long silence, an alarm started to blare. They had been hit, and things got worse from there. We have been hit. Report. Sir, the engine is not working and we are losing control. As the ship began to tumble due to the impact. The two tried desperately to turn the system back on while those who have been assigned as their guardian, to make sure they don't get ambushed or get stopped. If we don't get there soon, the swarm will wipe us before the charge happens. It's our duty and honor to make sure you do. I can do this. Trust, Morgan shouted at the end. There was so much to say, but as the ship got closer and closer, all that Morgan could see was not death, but opportunity for another world to prosper, and to start a new cycle of birth and hope. I have a plan. I need you to trust me, Commander. Engines, you'll set the timer, and I will take the sample. Set to manual release? Understood. A reply from Adams. The ship continued to fall, as it descended quickly as Morgan put on the suit and prepared for departure. I know that you might think it's crazy for someone like to do this, right? I mean someone who has the opportunity, who can help the future be saved and take all the credit, but that ain't me. What I know is that this has to end now. That is correct, Doctor, and I respect it. I will be ready soon to put in the coordinates. Adams replied with a shaken voice. She then went to contact the remaining people on board. As we have all agreed, we will stand until they have finished what they need to do. As the ship slowly began to tear from the immense pressure in the atmosphere, the end was getting closer, so the time to get out must come. As the two parted ways, they both exchanged a look. Nothing but respect. I'll see you on the other side, Morgan, Vance said as he opened the door for the doctor to move out. With every moment that passed, the light became ever so bright. Time has come. As Morgan began to adjust the machine, she also muttered, "Goodbye." The explosion was a white light. A cleansing inferno in the heart of darkness. It was more terrifying than beautiful, as the world saw and felt this destructive force. What is going on down there? I can't track them anymore. Life spoke with alarm over the calm. But what came after was but a deafening silence. Both hero and the villain, both destroyed and in single motion. The world was changed as an entire system has been destroyed. It had been the most horrifying and greatest event for the Coalition to have happened. What do we do now? There's no chance for any of them to survive. Glint asked. Liz spoke. Those humans, they have shown a way of fighting that we had not fathomed. A force with enough conviction that it's their only option. Now the weight had been placed on Lith, and their shoulders could be the salvation to end the swarm, or their downfall. There was a long and deafening silence as he got there. All channels send a message now. Inform each civilization to remember them. From now on, a new galaxy will begin, and those that know to act quick will inherit the flame. The silence after Helios died was more profound than the void it had sought to contain. The sensors that had once screamed with activity were now eerily still, the data streams choked with static. A world, teeming with trillions of potential lives, extinguished in a blinding flash. On the bridge of the silent dawn, Ambassador Light stared at the empty void where Hyperion had once been, a cold dread gripping his heart. The crystal structures on his skin pulsed with a dull, lifeless rhythm. He had witnessed countless deaths, but none had ever struck him with such brutal finality. Had we done it right? Was all he could think of. The plan had succeeded, for now the tide had turned against the swarm. But at what cost? The holographic display still projected the threat on the sector. However, there was another problem that was rising: the other council members. As the transmission of General Harris came through, a loud voice roared, "You cannot do this! We must stop these monsters! What these people did was an act of horror we must dash!" The transmission suddenly stopped. All that came through were nothing but statics. The broadcast had been cut. "It has started," Lith announced. "Our people cannot accept what has been done. What we agreed upon. Then you must understand the necessity of all this," Reed replied. His face, still streaked with grime and exhaustion, bore a newfound weight. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had stared back. "We did what we had to do to buy our side and yours time. We're too far in to turn around now." He paused, a flicker of grief crossing his face. "Earth is in a position that you do not understand. As long as we exist, the world is always threatened." Those on board that came from Earth nodded in acceptance. They were now protectors, no matter the cost. After a moment of understanding, a new message appeared. "I think what we should address more is the fact that Dr. Morgan is still on board with the knowledge. I think that is best if Dr. Morgan were to join you to further her research, so she won't have a repeat incident." "Thank you, Admiral," Vance spoke. "Dr. Morgan would be transferred to your ship. But do know, with her leaving, you leave your home defenseless." The ship began to make its way. "This will be a war unlike any other. We'll start with a new future that has been paved for the Alliance. The silent dawn has begun. The people believe that they have been saved by God." Morgan, for what had felt a lifetime, stared outside of the ship, looking at what is now called Helios. There are those that are now calling you the bringer of destruction, while others as the true angel of the Alliance. Glint spoke. They will know when it needs to happen. The data you provided and collected on Helios, she said with a low tone. It seems that what the scientist was right. Every living unit shares what they have done. From the cellular level, it's truly terrifying. Now only with everything that was lost, that the future is bright. Glint spoke back. A long silence stretched across all. This was a new path to take, and with all those in the silent dawn, a goal must be reached. We may have burned a new page, but now the real stories begin. Years passed. The immediate threat of the Void Horde, for then was contained but not eliminated. But at a high cost. Humanity had secured its place in the Aurora Stellar Alliance, not as just another member, but as an honored and feared protector. They were the shield against the darkness, the ones who would stand on the front lines, making the difficult choices that others could not bear. The image of the burning torch would be forever ingrained in the galaxy's heart, the eternal monument to the courage of 17 souls and more as ships have lost their way.